And of course, it was retweeted by Ben Shapiro. And it says HMO sees only 554 infections among 523 individuals who are fully vaccinated. It says data a week after second dose shows 93% effectiveness. And this is basically the article from the Times of Israel. So we're going to go into this article talking about, now they're talking about the Pfizer jab, right? So I'm going to preface this a little bit with cases in Israel. So before we even go and dig deep into the study that shows how effective, we're going to go over your own immune system, right? So of the local cases, as you can see right here in Israel, there have been 715,000, right? 715,000 cases, with 645,000 of those cases being recovered, with only 5,283 deaths. So if we're looking at overall percentage, we're not talking about percent population, we're talking about those who have lost their lives as a percentage of those who have been infected, right? So you have 5,283 people who have lost their lives. We're not going to worry about age, whether they're geriatric patients who would have died if they came in contact typically with any other sort of virus. We're not going to go over the, we're not going to go over whether the tests are faulty or not. We're just going to presume that every single one of these cases, every one of these deaths are 100% attributed to the virus, right? So out of the 715,000 cases that Israel has currently have, it has resulted in 5,283 deaths. So we would divide that by 715,000, and that would give you your CFR, which is referred to as your case fatality rate, meaning if you got the virus, what is the likelihood that you're going to experience death as a result of the virus. And so that brings you to, right, this is your 10th, your 100ths, and then this is your thousands place, right? So this represents here 7/10 of 1%, right? So out of all the cases that Israel has had, 7/10 of them have resulted in a death. Basically what that means, if we keep on going, right, if you keep going to the very end, right, you reach your full limitation of your population, whatever your population is, if the statistics can stays continuous, then eventually you would come to the limit of, out of the whole population that had been infected, 7/10 of 1% would lose their lives, which basically means that the virus has a 99.3% survival rate, right? If you were to reach the very limit of whatever population. And so that's basically your immune system, right? So your immune system came in contact with this particular virus, and you have a 99.3% chance. Now, of course, that's just over the entire population, not taking into consideration age groups, because overwhelmingly most geriatric patients lose their lives. The other thing that is important to understand, of course, is the actual population of Israel is only about 9 million. So it's roughly a little bit the size of Manhattan, right? So overwhelmingly, we have to take a look at the median age, right? So look at the median age, look at the median age of Israel, which is lower than the US. And I've done several videos showing that in places where you have a much lower medium average age, overwhelmingly the virus is a non-factor for most people, as shown by the statistics, right? As shown by the statistics of the case fatality rate, right? And this, so for example, if you were to comparison like for the US, right? You go to the US and as you can see, it's higher, right? 38.1. And in places like Africa, where it's much lower, you would see, right, we're right about almost 20 years. So that's one of the reasons why in places like Africa, like they're not even worried about COVID. They're more worried about malaria. Malaria is much more of an impact on the population than things like COVID, because the younger the population, the less likely you are to, one, to experience death, two, to experience the hard side effects, right? So if you were to look for like Berlin, right? Berlin has a much higher, right, 42.7. And that's why in Berlin, they were having numerous people who were passing away because of the virus, because the population of the area is much older. And so that's important. Those are important statistics to give to people so that they can, of course, then formulate a conclusion instead of just trying to mislead people by giving them only part of the information, right? So that's like if you were to do, like, let's say, like UK, right? UK median age population is roughly 40 years. That's why that's one of the reasons why the UK has a much higher death rate. Same thing, for example, like in Italy, right? If you were to look at the median age in Italy, you'll see that's one of the reasons why 47.3. Overwhelmingly, they have a geriatric population. So for those people, they will experience a higher case fatality rate because most of the people that the virus is going to come in contact with are typically on the older spectrum than, for example, in places like in Israel or in Africa, right? So this is important details to talk about when you're talking about the vaccine, right? To consider how effective the vaccine is. Just based off of the statistics, their own immune system of those in Israel, of course, is going to filter out the virus at a much higher rate than the efficacy that they're saying for the second dose of the jab. The second dose of the jab would only be primarily applicable to the 5,000 who experienced their lives. So since their own immune system is actually higher, it's like 90%, but we'll actually have to also look at currently of those recovered, right? So of those who have recovered, it's 645 divided by 700. Oops. Let's go back. Divided by 715. And that would basically currently, excuse me, that would basically currently give you a 90% of people who have had the virus, right, already passed through the virus and have come on the other side. Currently, according to the statistics, that 9 out of 10 people will clear the virus no problem, right? 9 out of 10 will clear the virus. They won't experience death. And so you can continue that basically to the limit. So now we can basically dig into the article. It says HMO data a week after second dose shows 93% effectiveness unequivocally, proving vaccine success and leaving no doubt it saved many lives in Israel. It says an Israel healthcare provider that has vaccinated 500,000 people with whom doses of the Pfizer vaccine says that only 554 people, or 0.1%, have been subsequently diagnosed with the virus. There have been 4 severe cases and no people have died. And it says that means the effectiveness rate stands at 93%. It says Maccabi Healthcare Services announced on Thursday after comparing its immunized members to a diverse control group and unvaccinated members. I'd have to find the actual study. I'm not sure if they link it in this article, but I probably have to go searching for it on the net. And it says full protection for people who have been vaccinated is believed to kick in after a week after the second shot. And this is, of course, brings into consideration because if that is the case, right? If you take the vaccine and it provides full immunization like most vaccines do, at least according to how they're supposed to work, once your body builds up an immune response, your body is automatically producing antibodies, right? So that if you do come in contact with the virus, your body then releases the antibodies so that the spaces basically where the virus would attach itself to, it can't. That's basically how the antibodies work. They basically fill the gap so that the virus can't come in contact. Basically, like the virus is the key, your cell is the lock. And so basically, since there's already a key, the antibody in place, that doesn't allow the virus then to come in contact with the lock, your cell, and then take over the cell and then start to mass produce the virus. And so since it says that it kicks in after 8 days, the next question would be, then why would you need to wear a mask, right? Since your own immune system, right, out of all those who have come in contact with the virus, 90% of them clear the virus. Of those who have died from the virus, it's 0.7% of all people who have come in contact with the virus, right? Meaning that the survival rate, the case survival rate would be 99.3% of all people so far. So then why would you need to wear a mask? The reason being is because the more people who come in contact with the virus and then pass through it, which is currently 90%, right? That means that there's less people that you're going to bump into, right? So when you're walking about on your daily journeys, the more people that you come in contact with who have already had the disease or who have gotten the vaccination, you're less likely to come in contact with someone who is infectious. And since I've already shown through several videos that there is no such thing as asymptomatic spread, at the very least, according to Dr. Fauci himself, who had stated previously that out of all history, right, of all respiratory history, that there has never been, out of all the data prior to his life, right? He's not just talking about just while he's been working for the past 40 plus years, but in all the history of respiratory illnesses, there have never been a virus that has been passed on via asymptomatic. Now, of course, I'll link that video where I did that up top, right? And it goes on to say, McCombie statistics are being closely monitored around the world for giving the first major insight into how the vaccine performs outside of clinical trials, and they are being widely hailed for indicating that real-world effectiveness is close to 95%, as cited by the Pfizer clinical trial. It says this data unequivocally proves that the vaccine is very effective, not quite effective as your own immune system, since according to the numbers, your own immune system will allow you to pass through the virus with at least 90%, right? As currently 90% of people who have had it cleared the virus at a 90% rate. And in terms of those who have lost their lives, it's only been 0.3. So 99.3% of people who have had the virus will live, right? As this data unequivocally proves, like I said, it says the senior McCombie, she stressed that among those who have been vaccinated and been infected, the vast majority has experienced the virus lightly. Out of the 523, and that's always been the case. It's always been the case that those who had, typically most people who get it with very, very mild symptoms, overwhelmingly, it's geriatric individuals who end up having, or people who are obese, high cholesterol, diabetes, etc., that typically experience a much more severe reaction to a novel virus. It goes on to say only 15 require hospitalization, 8 are in mild condition, 3 are in moderate condition, and 4 in severe condition. Speaking as Israel grapples with a slowdown in the vaccination campaign, I've talked about in another video why globally we're experiencing a vaccination slowdown. It says that she urged people to take notice of the new statistics and book slots warning that those who don't are likely to get infected. And that might be the case. But again, like I said before, there are more people who have either had the virus or who have had the vaccine. You're less likely to bump into someone, because the more people that have it, the less likely you are, as you're walking about in your doing your daily life, you're less likely to bump into somebody who has the virus, and then of course contract it from that person. It says anyone who has not been vaccinated so far, it says please hurry up and make an appointment as soon as possible. It says protect yourself from a serious illness and, God forbid, death, as well as the possibility that could infect and endanger others. And like I've said, from the statistics, out of all of the people who have been infected, only 5,000 people who have died. That's in no way, shape, or form to minimize the impact of those who have died. But again, with almost no information, right, currently, of those who have passed away, from what I've seen overwhelmingly from country after country after country, I've done numerous videos, that overwhelmingly the people who end up losing their lives are typically people who are beyond life expectancy, right? In Berlin, where they made a big deal about people dying, overwhelmingly the people who passed away in Berlin were 79 to 85 years old. But the average life expectancy is like 75. So most of these individuals were between 5 and 10 years past life expectancy. So it should not surprise people that many of these individuals, unfortunately, would lose their lives. But they would lose their lives even to the flu or any other respiratory illness, because their past life expectancy, most of these individuals typically are basically a revolving door for the hospital. They typically come in at least once a month or so basically for just about anything, because their bodies are breaking down, they're shutting down, and they don't have the strength in their immune system to basically fend off against just the normal diseases that they come in contact with, let alone a novel virus. And so it's important that when you hear of this sort of information, people will get all excited and they'll run out there to get their jab. It's important to stop, read the information, and then take a look at the data that comes out in comparison to cases, recovered cases, deaths, in comparison to the population, right? And a comparison to the population age. And this is typically what you would look for in individuals who are giving you scientific facts, right? This is the information where you can give all this information out to the population and then say at the end of the day, draw your own conclusion.